What time is it there, Brent?
Ooh, it's 10 o'clock here Pacific.
10 o'clock. As you can see, I am not in my normal attire because I am joining you from another location on vacation, but I am so dedicated to this cause. Here I am on LinkedIn with the only shirt I have on vacation. Super excited to be here to talk with the amazing Brent Redford. Brent, say hello to all of our friends on LinkedIn.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for this too. We're coming from different places, different time zones, but an important topic, so I'm excited for it.
So today's topic is we're going to talk about voiceovers, and I had this really fun debate with Brent while we were on at a on a shoot, right, for a couple days,
Yeah.
and in between takes, we were kind of talking about this because it's a conversation that actually comes up a lot with local businesses, that are trying to produce creative on their own. Brent, Nicole, should I use a male voiceover? Should I use AI driven voiceover? A female voiceover? Like, when is it appropriate? So, we've got about 20 minutes budgeted today to talk about this. And I'm really excited to have Brent here. He's a creative director at a company called Mnemonic. Do you want to tell our audience a little bit about what you do first before we get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a perfect setup because we were out on a shoot for a client, and that's what my team here does. So, as part of Comcast Advertising, we help clients who are looking for campaigns create their campaigns. So, whether it's primarily video, we're doing also other assets because everybody should across social media. And we go from concept to execution to delivering these through all of Comcast Advertising. Nicole and I were working on one specific project here when it came up because these are things that we talk about constantly. If you're talking about actors, what the message is, but a big one is voiceover. How do you decide who the voiceover is? What type of voiceover? It is a constant conversation on every project we have. So, yeah, that's why I'm here at the table today because you said debate. It was a discussion, probably a debate, because this can be debated in 1,000 different ways. And I love talking about this.
Well, thanks so much for coming. If you have questions for Brent or myself, feel free to hit us up in the chat. We're happy to answer them as we kind of jump into this topic. Creative has many paths to success. I think we could agree on that, right? There's not
Yes,
one
absolutely.
path. And in some cases, I've looked at spots, Brent, where I could see it go either way. It could go well with a female voiceover, or it could go good with the male voiceover. So let's start there. When you think about spots you've looked at, over here at Elevate, we test about 1,000 spots a year. So we see it in our own data. Where do you think it could go either way? Let's start there. What are
Oh,
some
that's a
categories, or what are some businesses that you're like, well, I could argue it both ways?
that's a good setup because there are so many different ways to do it. One isn't always right depending on the category, but sometimes we have some cliches in advertising or some stereotypes that people are used to. Like for example, if you hear a voiceover that's Sunday, 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 it's monster trucks. It's going to be that same guy doing the voice every time. But on the opposite side, where cliches used to exist, that a car commercial always had a guy driving and, we're blowing him out this weekend. A lot of that's evolved. It's evolved because of who the audience is. It's evolved because of the industries have changed in the best kinds of ways. So there's some that still make sense, like
Well, and
monster
I if
trucks.
yeah, and if I can jump into that, we saw a shift in actually the pandemic. It really was 2020 when some of the tactics that we've used with audio started to, I guess the word I'm looking for is like lose their luster or
Mm,
set of words. In our testing, there was this sort of America was tired. They were tired of being yelled at. They were tired
yeah.
of being told what to do. And they have, the internet at their fingertips. I mean, I like to say now today consumers are like investigative reporters at this point. They can find anything out about you in 30 seconds flat,
Yeah.
particularly if they're Gen Zers. Oh
Yeah.
man, those guys can find an old boyfriend in like 20 seconds. But I digress. I digress. But the pandemic, we saw it in our ad testing, Brent. Like there was just this monumental shift in this acceptance of the yelling at you messaging,
hmm
and it stopped being as effective. So, you've heard me say this, the whole NASCARing of an ad where you have like 20 million value props and it's like boom, 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 boom. And that used to work. Like we're on a sale and then there's this and that. And
Uh-huh.
then did you see all those graphics? And,
Yep.
there's going to be a test at the end. And 90% of people,
Is
when
it?
we ask in our ad testing, don't even recall the name of the company because it was just too much. But coming back to the topic of the voice itself, tired America, they're sitting there on their sofa or on the bus or Bart in your case. They're
Yeah.
watching something on a phone, they're
Right.
distracted. They're not as intensely focused on creative as they once were, right? Because there's more screens in their lap and their fingers. And so that causes some um, apprehension to that yelling type messaging or that really strong voice. Although movies still do it. Tell me about
So
what your thoughts are on that. This
sometimes
weekend, 4th of July.
in a world. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Some of those cliches still play so well because, like you said, everybody was hammered for years and years with advertising because you couldn't get away from it. But now that we have every screen, you and I were just talking about this recently, the hook in the first few seconds because of skippable ads. It's more important that we're not shoving people into a world where they're bombarded by NASCAR ads and messages. We have to be able to communicate with them because that represents the brand. Now, movies are a different world because we're talking about movies. You're trying to sell that movie experience. So, okay, yeah, in a world sometimes does still work. Monster Jams still work. But if you're a business and you're trying to communicate with people, you don't want to be shouting at them. Now, the purpose of what you're trying to communicate in whatever message, whether it's a TV ad or you're watching on social media, things like that, that matters. That context matters because there is still a place for some cliches. But you're right, the audience has changed. The experience they have with your message has absolutely changed. So now we have an opportunity to speak to people instead of yelling at them. Now, with the targeting that all advertising can do, and we're having conversations rather than just shouting from the rooftop. So it changes it.
Yeah. Yeah, and so let's talk about the male voiceover, right? So that's the one that you typically hear yelling. You don't typically I actually don't think can recall a female voiceover yelling at me as a consumer. I'm sure someone who's in this LinkedIn live right now is Googling it and they're going to prove us wrong in the chat. But
Yeah, drop a link
um,
in the chat. Isn't that what they
yeah.
say? Yeah, there's probably something out there. But no, you're right. The evolution of where traditionally it was male voice is the voice of authority and female voice was the voice of comfort and soothing. Those cliches existed for a long time, both societal because of demographics. That's obviously evolved. Gone are those days of where only business owners were men. This is a long time ago. We had a recent situation with the client where for years they were running a campaign. It was a document shredding company, and they were advertising to business owners in the Sacramento area. So they put a guy on there, and he spoke to him as if he was a business owner, and they were speaking one to one with business owners, and it was fine, and it worked for a long time. They decided that with the industry evolving, and this is only 2 years ago, so right post pandemic, they wanted to start speaking differently about their business because when our creative director went in there and sat with them, did a great discovery, and found out the business owner predominantly was still male, but that wasn't the decision maker. The
Mm,
decision maker was the office manager, and found in talking with the client that they're working predominantly with female office managers. So yeah, that message coming from that guy who looks like the business owner and talks like the business owner isn't what's resonating with them. So when you
mm,
switch to a female voiceover, because now we're talking from somebody who understands to somebody about a specific topic, it landed better. So
mm,
now just a shift in that, and nothing analytical about it said that you have to do a male versus female because of the industry of shredding. Is more
mm,
about our audience is the office manager. That's the
mm.
decision maker. So let's talk to her because 75% of their clients were female at that point.
Well, I
That
think
kind of
that
shift matters.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point is know your audience, as you said, who your buying persona is or who your desired customer is.
Hmm.
There's some cases where I work with a brand that is primarily over 60 and it's, skews male, but the real opportunity in that brand is actually with women under 45. And so, if you're going to capture that audience anyway through legacy, then consider putting creative together that reaches that persona that you desire. And you need to think about who he or she is, how old they are, and be representative of that in your storytelling.
I
So,
love that. Yeah, we all know the best way to communicate is knowing your audience. What that looks like in voiceovers or in spokesperson is who you trying to talk to, but also what do you want them to do or know?
yeah,
Because tones,
absolutely.
yeah, the messaging's
But
big. Go ahead.
so going back to the question of where you see it could go either way, what comes to mind?
Ooh, a good one's healthcare. I think that recently one of my favorite campaigns that uses a specific voice. Now it's a celebrity, so it kind of counts, but Allison Janney's been doing the voiceover for Kaiser Permanente for a couple years. The approach they shifted from male into her, she's so good. If you ever seen her in anything she does, she plays a fantastic quirky mom. She's not the traditional loving mother. She's got a little bit of spice to her. She's got a little bit of excitement. So she has evolved that campaign to have a little bit of attitude in it. It's not just a soothing healthcare, we're going to take care of you. It's is the doctor listening? Are they really? A little bit of questioning, challenging, and also authority in there. So I think that that's a good example of evolving even where soothing uh, caring in healthcare used to be just a little bit bland. The step into that, have a little more attitude, have a little spice to it, I think is challenging the traditional approach to it to put something more interesting out there.
But you do see a lot of healthcare campaigns with nice male voices as well, and they work equally in our ad tests.
You do. So what are they
Yeah.
trying to accomplish? Like what are they trying to say within it? Homes.com just did something really funny on their Super Bowl. Homes.com wanted to say that Homes.com is the best.com. Really funny. They traditionally have not used a voiceover. They've had stars in the commercials, but this time they put Morgan Freeman in there and they had him say it because the
I mean,
lawyers
that's
said,
like the legacy of all voiceovers, right?
and
If
that,
you
yeah,
slay Morgan Freeman, like you've
yeah.
arrived.
And
That
that's
guy's a
the joke
legend
of it. Whatever he says is truth. It's
automatically.
automatically, yeah, exactly. But the joke here and what they played with it is not, you don't believe Morgan Freeman. They're saying something they can't because they can't legally say they're the best. But if Morgan Freeman says it, does that mean it's true? It's the same
I
thing
think
with any
so.
voiceover. I mean, I would believe it. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
But it's the
such a
same
sucker
thing.
for marketing.
Yeah, and that's what they did so well with that is it's a marketing message. It's not just using him because you believe him. They're using him because they're making you remember that homes.com is the best.com and it's true. Morgan Freeman's saying it or that's our
Mm,
URL. It was a great
mm,
marketing message.
mm.
So beyond the use of the voiceover, they played it almost as a gimmick. Brilliant marketing in that. I really, really love that because they could bring in somebody else now that could be a female voice that everybody knows. Scarlett Johansson was doing the Esurance spots for a while because they wanted to go to a younger demographic that felt more conversational. If she did that same read, they would ask the same question. Hey, is it more appropriate because she's saying it? Can we legally say it now? Because she's got kind of an authentic but authoritative voice too. It's about how
So,
you use it.
yeah. So let's think. There's another example that comes to mind for me that's actually the opposite of that for sake of debate. And it's a roofing company out on the East Coast. And I think I told you the story when we were hanging out on that shoot. There is two potential voices in this situation that owner's
Uh-huh.
considering, right? Voice number one is a salesperson, because if you're a smaller business, you don't have Morgan
You don't have
Friedman
Morgan
budget.
Freeman. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you're
Yeah,
working with the resources you have, and most people that are
absolutely.
listening in right now are probably in that boat. So you have limited resources. You're trying to figure out what to go with some resource you have internally. So this company has this one sales guy. He's boisterous. He's kind of got a East Coast accent. He's an everyday guy, right? And then we have this female who is a family member. She's, you know, really well liked. She's has kind of a bouncier, friendly voice, and the question is, which one do we use, right?
Uh,
Because you could really go either way. If you're trying to reach a younger demographic, the bouncier, more friendly female voice could work.
mhm.
Conversely, the authority of the sales guy and kind of his quirkiness that comes with that was a bit I'm sure, endearing, right? So in this situation, you really could go either way. But see, I have the benefit that I can test these people, right, in front of a consumer group of 400 people, which I did. And the one that prevailed was actually the male. And when you read the comments, Brent, about why the male resonated, you saw things like, that's the guy that sounds like he'd be the one that shows up to my house. And I'm
Love that.
paraphrasing, right? And
Of course.
but that's what, she was a great option, and at without the data, you would have assumed that would be a great choice because, well, I'm trying to reach, you just said, Nicole and Brent, you're trying to reach a younger demographic, you should go with someone that represents that. Be careful. It depends on the industry, right? That might work
Yeah.
in healthcare, frankly, elective health, that might work. But you got to be careful about that voice because it has to be credible. It can't sound too young, like, wait a second, you're talking to me about a $10,000 balloon that I swallow that helps me lose weight. And you're having a kid explain it to me who's 20 years old, but she
Yeah.
has a really good voice.
Yep.
Sorry, 20-year-olds aren't kids, they are professionals as well. But you know
Yeah.
where I'm going with that, right? A
Absolutely.
less refined voice
Yeah.
versus,
One
in
of
this case, a roofer, right? The male voice resonated better because it's what people expect they're going to interact with that industry in their home.
It's an authentic representation of what they expect when somebody shows up, what they would expect when they interact with this business. Because the whole reason of the campaign is to get somebody to call you or to have a quote, have somebody come out to your house and look at your roof. So if that's what they're expecting to see, it's the same thing as if you go to a website and it doesn't like it doesn't represent the business well. It's the same thing. It's the voice. Is what are you expecting in a consumer experience? What are you conveying through that messaging? And if everybody said, or the majority said that, hey, I expect this is the guy that's going to come out. He knows roofing. He's not subcontracting it somebody else. He's not just throwing sales at me. This is the guy that knows what he's talking about. He's going to show up and he's going to give me the right answer. That's the perfect reason to that voice. That fits exactly what you're trying to accomplish in your marketing. I love that.
What about automotive?
Mm,
I think you do a lot of automotive spots. I'm
we
curious
do.
what you'd say. Things have changed so much in that industry in the last 2 years.
Yeah, the automotive industry has wildly changed. You're right. Gone are the days of showing up, kicking tires, having bad experiences because somebody's trying to get over on you. The old car salesman cliches, those are gone. What you'll see a lot of commercials now are talking about customer experience being the number one. There's no commission sales. There's a one price. So you show up and the price is already there because the internet exists. You can buy completely online and have it shipped to your house through a Carvana or another company, right? So the experience that people are having at the dealerships now matters more than ever. It matters more than the inventory because we'll find the car. But when you come here, you have a better experience because it's not pressured. You come in and find exactly what you want. We are seeing a shift. We've had more female GMs at dealerships than ever before. And that makes a big difference. We recently did a spot for a Cadillac dealership out here in California that has a female GM, and she is the face of the company, and she gives the best experience at this dealership out of any Cadillac I've worked with. And she's the face of it in the best way. And she talks about what the experience is. It's not about price. It's not about item. It's about the experience. And she conveys that. Now, not every dealership has that. Sometimes we have dealerships that are kind of up in the foothills, and they do a very friendly, appropriate to their demographic truck commercial for the foothills of Tahoe. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the guy that you would expect to be selling you a truck when you're living up there versus buying a Cadillac in the Bay Area. So again, the
Mm.
audience, but also the character of the dealership matters.
Mm-hmm. Is
So,
there any situations where you see a female voiceover just generally hit better than a male? Obviously, these
whoa,
specific examples, but any particular industries.
uh, um, any specific industries in general. We've done a couple campaigns over the pandemic that were a lot about mental health.
Mm.
We did some stuff with the Attorney General for California. And she was fantastic as an on-camera narrator, telling about all the different things that California was offering for mental health. And then we also had people come in from park rangers to mental health services people who are also great on camera. But I think that the female videos there tended to land better as we were talking about mental health in that time. Now, she was a figurehead, of course, represented that. Um, but I think that that's a vertical that we've seen the most success with female specific VOs versus male specific VOs.
I'm trying to think of what I've seen test really well with women. Mental health makes sense to me. I'm trying to
Uh-huh.
think what else, like elective health.
Elective health. Yeah, I think that also um, when we're talking about just recently, we've done one for consumer goods, right? Talking about specifically mattresses. When we're advertising to families, if the mother is the decision maker on this, we found that
Mm,
that's worked really, really well because we're speaking to her. Because same as the shredding company, it wasn't typically the male figurehead in the family that was making the decision, it was the female. So, in speaking to her in a way that she understood, so she wasn't being pressured because she's the boss. She runs the
yeah.
house. The whole point of the creative there is that she's able to do these things because of the purchase. That is a perfect example that we can tell her story with female voiceover. So, I think that depending on who's the purchasing or the decision maker for the family, those verticals
Mm.
tend to lean towards the female voiceover when it's female.
Well, but you're seeing a change in American consumers where women are taking over
Yeah. And
in
that's the
many
best part.
categories and are the primary investigators, researchers,
Absolutely.
making those decisions with their, counterpart males in the home as well. But a lot
And
of
that's
times you're
evolved
seeing brand shift. Yeah, it really has evolved.
in the best
Yeah.
way because a lot of those traditional stereotypes are out the window in a good way. Some
Mm,
stereotypes still exist because cliches are easy to sell with as long as they're
mm-hmm.
positive. But
Mm-hmm.
with that transitioning in our society, we have a better opportunity for empowerment, equality, all of those through things like this and the ability to communicate better with proper targeting so that you're not bombarded by messages you don't care about. Now you're seeing messages that are actually relevant to you, speaking to you, not just shouting at you. And I love
Yeah.
that evolution in what we do.
So, but to the business owner, to the marketer that goes, but I've got a Memorial Day sale coming up. I need to yell it
Uh-huh.
from the rooftops. What do you say to them in that situation? Because I hear that all the time. It's gotta be louder. Turn up the voiceover. We need it
Uh-huh.
50% off, and like that. We have to get the attention. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. There's still a place for that. There is. Some people still react to it, but we know as consumers,
Like
people
maybe Black Friday. I
like a
feel like
Black
Black
Friday.
Friday. That's one of
It's
the
a
few places I'm like, go for it.
it's a holiday where that's expected, and if you don't do that, that's crazy. Speaking to your audience appropriately and knowing your audience, knowing that they may be waiting until Memorial Day because they know that's when the sale's coming. That's why those events are big. So yeah, they're okay being spoken to with a 50% off. Let's get this urgency out. You've been waiting for this all year. It's the 50% sale. That's
The
appropriate.
doorbusters.
The doorbusters. We're throwing in this free, buy this and get this. That's an appropriate experience because that's the consumer experience. That's what they're both grown up, used to, kind of accustomed to. Where it's appropriate, it works really well. And the consumer likes that because they're waiting for that sale to get that sale. Great. So let's speak to them the
Yeah,
way they know. But in the
yeah,
off months, don't be screaming at them. Prep them. Tell them why you. So by the time they get to the why you now of Memorial Day, they're already bought in you. They're comfortable with your brand. They know who you are, and they're just waiting for now's the right time to buy. And that's where that
yeah,
sale does heavy up on the messaging that you've been laying the foundation for the last month.
yeah. So I know we got a couple minutes left. One last one that I wanted to talk about
Okay.
is infographic storytelling
Oh,
and like educational storytelling. Now, we might
mm,
not align on this one. I know so far we've pretty much agreed on everything. I feel like it hasn't been much
okay.
of a debate, although it's been a
I'll
fun
try harder. Yeah.
conversation. Yeah, no, no.
Okay.
On this one, I think it's male voiceover all the time. And let me tell you
Mm,
why. And feel free to chime in. There's something about that. heavier tone. Now, the Allison Janney example, like a female that has it as well, might be a pivot, but most people don't have her kind of budget, right?
Right.
But when you're doing infographic, and I'm talking like explaining like a diet, like let's say it's a
Hmm.
company that's a diet solution, and then you're like, oh, if you do this, and then this is what happens, and the proteins, and you're trying to explain how it works like chemically in your body. And so you're using graphics to tell the story as opposed to visuals, like real life visuals. Um, I see male voiceovers test better when it's a slower pace educational spot than I see women. And I'm not sure why. I see that in the data. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh,
Infographic
that's
storytelling, educational. I'd go male all the way almost every time. What about you?
that's fascinating. First thing I'm thinking of is Jurassic Park, of course, the talking DNA as they're telling the story of
Yes,
how they built, right? Yeah.
John Hamm,
Storytelling
and
from
he's kind of walking through it, and he's got this commanding voice that
Mhm.
slows down. It's walking you through how the dinosaur DNA is made,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're going for education, that does make sense because this isn't a arguable fact. What you're telling right here is educational. You need to be instruction. This isn't conversational. This is teaching. And if you're looking for authority, obviously we talked about it already. Some of the traditional feelings on male voiceover is that, yeah, you say John Hamm. You know, the reason they put him on Mercedes Benz is because you hear his voice, you think expensive. Sure. And if he's going to narrate it, you're going to believe it. You know, not the same as Morgan Freeman, who's going to make you feel things. But if it's an authoritative, unquestionable voice and you want to put that into an infographic telling education about a diet and how it works, not to say that there's not fantastic ways that a female voiceover could tell that, but I could see why your research is coming back saying more traditionally male voiceovers on that. I get that
All right.
because
Well,
it's a
there you
heavy
have it.
sell. Yeah,
Yeah. It's just a heavy lift, right? And I don't know. I would, I don't know this, but I'm inferring that it's that harder, raspier, thicker voice that it
hmm,
just I'm sure you could find it in a woman maybe,
sure.
but it tends to come out of men more, and so it works really well in those infographic spots.
It carries weight. And that's a
Hmm.
really good point because you talk about infographic spots. So it's not just about business verticals, but it's about the asset and who's watching it and how they're watching it. The
Sure.
experience you have with different platforms and different videos and different, even if it's the same brand, could change. Quick, easy
Yeah.
example: San Francisco Giants. Diehard fan, grew up here in the Bay Area.
Woo,
If
go
you watch them on,
Giants.
yeah, go Giants. If you watch them on TV, you got Krug and Cut. They're the best. They're legendaries. They're the voice of the Giants on TV. You listen on the radio, you got John Miller, you got Dave Fleming. You've got great legacy male voices on there. But if you go to the ballpark, San Francisco Giants were the first during the 90s. They brought Sherry Davis in, public announcer, first in Major League to have a female voice in the stadium. And then Renault Brooks Moon for the next like 20 years during the 10, 12, 14 championship run. She was the voice of the Giants when you were at a game. So your experience watching at home on TV is amazing. At the ballpark, it's amazing. But there were male voiceovers and female voice. So the brand of the Giants was still the same, but delivered in two very, very different voices. So
Well,
it's the same with infographics. Maybe
maybe
their
it's
TVs,
evolving.
it's going to continue to evolve as we break those calm glass ceilings. When Sherry Davis was the first, if we break that and show how much better once we get out of these old traditional habits into communicating better, the experience for consumers is better, the experience for creatives and marketers themselves is better.
Brent, it was so awesome to have this conversation with you today. Just really quickly, if you'd like to have a quick consultation with Brent and his team, if you're curious about creative and you need some help, you can hit him up in the chat below or DM me for his contact information. I'm happy to share it. It's always fun to see you in person and on the screen. And for everybody else that dropped in, thank you so much for coming. And I hope to see you next week on Get Nerdy with Bergie.